people talk about anime being all light and fluffy and something that's mostly for children, there is one show that I like to bring up over all others. Sure, you can bring up things like Elfen Lied, which sports nudity and dismemberment, and then you have more hardcore shows like Rin Daughters of Mnemosyne with off-screen rape and other unpleasantries. And of course there are some scenes in Baccano which I recall fondly as some prime examples of why anime is not just for kids. But today's show tops all of that because the concepts in this one are much simpler. And unlike the others where you have hardcore stuff all of, if not most of the time, this show likes to delay its extreme portions. It is a master of a little thing called pacing. It shows you what it wants, when it wants to, and keeps you in the dark most of the time. Ladies, gentlemen, and others, my name is Arcada, and welcome to Glass Reflection. Today, Higurashi no Naku Koro ni, or as it is unfortunately titled in English, When They Cry, as well as its second season, Higurashi Kai. Let's jam. Before I start to get into the fascinating thing about the Higurashi plotline, I should point out that because this thing is indeed so fascinating, it kind of spoils the end of episode 4. So if you're the type of person that likes to go into a show with absolutely no knowledge whatsoever, feel free to stop this review and go watch it at your leisure. It shouldn't be too much of a surprise that Higurashi is going to get a recommendation from me at the end of this video. Anyway, so go. Off with you. Be free. For the rest of us, let's continue on. The plot of Higurashi follows a group of children from a rural Japanese town called Hinamizawa. And these children, over the course of the anime, swap the protagonist role depending on who gets focus for that particular arc. Ah yes, unlike most shows, not including long-running shonen, story arcs are very important in Higurashi because, as we find out in the final moments of episode 4, people die a lot in this show. But unlike the common anime belief that people die when they are killed, in Higurashi, yes, at the end of every arc, more or less every character is dead. But then at the start of the next episode, everybody lives! Everybody lives! The great thing about Higurashi is that the plot is contained within a time loop, kind of like Groundhog Day, wherein at the end of each story arc, everything resets back to how it was at the beginning. The catch, however, is that while a lot of the core plot points remain the same, each reset is different from the last. People die in different orders, different ways, and by different people. Higurashi is a supernatural horror mystery show, and it is a prime example of everything that is right with those genres. I'm the type of person who, when watching a show like CSI or Castle or shows of that nature, I like to figure out the who, the what, the where, the why, and how they get caught all before the halfway point. It's those kind of mystery shows that make me feel smart, so this show was all gravy for me. It gives you clues throughout each and every story arc as to what is going on in the big picture, but then something happens, something that makes you doubt everything you've been told thus far. So now you no longer know what is a clue and what is merely a figment of the character's mind. Everything in the show's plot is divided into question arcs and answer arcs. The question arcs begin the story anew with new clues and new murders to further the story along as a whole, while also having its own little story about the characters contained within its nice little time loop. The answer arc to any given question arc usually comes many episodes down the road, and most of the time it is just an almost identical repeat of the question arc, but from a different character's perspective, giving us new clues about everything that happened and why. Sure, it takes 2 seasons for everything to be solved and the entire show to be wrapped up in a nice little bow, but it was one hell of a ride. The characters of Higurashi are varied, and most of them suffer from various ailments and emotional backgrounds, from family death, to abuse, to just basically going insane. Thankfully, our characters are strong enough to keep violent tendencies and other emotional baggage subdued, at least for a time. Which is until about when the Cotton Drifting Festival happens. The Cotton Drifting Festival is the one fixed point in any given arc, and it is usually the point where shit hits the fan. Before the festival, everything is upbeat. Our characters are having fun, playing, pulling pranks on each other, whatever. But as soon as the festival hits, the curse of Orashio-sama arrives, bringing with it mass paranoia and, well, death in the most violent ways possible. In every arc, something different happens that triggers one of the character's violent tendencies, and that something could be very small. A simple choice of who to give a doll to can result in the slaughter of many townsfolk. Now, this also makes Higurashi one of my favorite visual novel adaptations. Oh, did I not mention that before? Well, it is, and here's why. In your typical visual novel adaptation, one of two things happens. Either the creators take one arc of the game and adapt it all on its own, see Fate Stay Night, or, as is the case with romantic visual novels, the creators take the best parts from all of the arcs and combine them into one cohesive story, see every key adaptation ever. Higurashi shows you every ending, specifically the bad ones. Every massacre, every paranoia-induced freakout represents their own individual bad endings. But you need to see those bad endings in order to piece together the truth, so that hopefully, at one point, everybody survives. I'll be honest, the animation is not the greatest thing about this show. Studio Dean have never been at the height of animation quality, but thankfully, they have never been utter shit either. Most of the designs in Higurashi are, well, comparing them to other work in 2006, rather poor. Some might say that because of this, it distracts from the overall atmosphere of the show. I, however, would say otherwise. One of the major atmospheric changes in Higurashi occurs when the opening episodes of an arc are all light and fluffy, but then followed shortly thereafter by death and despair. The designs for the show are absolutely perfect for the light and fluffy bits, as is the animation style when those scenes are shown, but then the same style is used for the darker portions, which I think gives them a bit more contrast. If you had intensely detailed animation for Higurashi, it would have been a lot more jarring. Higurashi's designs also are the start of what some anime fans refer to as the Higurashi face. It's when a character's expression becomes frighteningly exaggerated during moments of internal terror, and it is a face that has been used by many in anime since its creation. What faces they are, giving us a look into the tortured souls who wear them, a glimpse into their pain and suffering, expressions so true to form that there is nothing they can do but laugh. To open your eyes wide and laugh in the face of your darkest fears. And now, the weather. The soundtrack for Higurashi was composed by the masterful Kenji Kawai, famous for the Ghost in the Shell film soundtracks. For Higurashi's soundtrack as a whole, I must admit it's rather depressing for something Kawai has done, although that's mostly not his fault. A lot of the soundtrack plays along with the tone of the series, with about half of the tracks being backing for the more upbeat parts of the show. The rest of it, however, is where the soundtrack really shines, giving a quite eerie feeling of dread and despair, with the main theme of the series, simply titled Main Theme, being some of my favorite atmospheric work in any anime ever. The dub, though... Okay, let me put it this way. I can count on one hand how many English dubs I just refuse to listen to, and Higurashi is one of them. The other one is Final Fantasy Unlimited, but there's no point talking about that. It's really bad, and considering the effort put into the Japanese dub, with the tones and the voices and, my god, the laughs, it's really depressing just how bad the English dub actually is. It really feels like the dub was just there because at the time, the licensors thought that everything needed a dub, and it was just kind of slapped on. And because of that, I'm not too happy and utterly disappointed with it. Higurashi is one of my favorite examples of storytelling and pacing in anime. It's well written with likable characters, well, at least most of the time. It has some brilliant atmosphere in tone and, of course, in music. And I can even argue that the lore animation quality of the show adds to it rather than takes away. Though I don't know many people that would actually agree with me on that front. The biggest problem I've ever had with Higurashi, however, is not with the show itself, but rather its localization. Firstly, only the first season was ever licensed. Second season, which concludes the story and the mystery, has never been touched. And stopping at just season 1 leaves a lot to be desired, which may or may not have led to the lack of popularity of this series in North America, especially for those unaware that the second season even existed. The dub is a complete mess, really and truly. And lastly, in English, the show's first season was titled When They Cry. Who the fuck are they? Seriously, I could name 2 translations of the original Japanese title that makes more sense. There's When the Cicadas Cry, as Higurashi can be translated into cicada. You know, those little bug things that like hanging out in tall grass and making noises in the background. But also, Higurashi can be translated to mean day-to-day life, making it possible to translate the full title into When the Day-to-Day Life Is No More. Sure, neither of these are perfect titles, I'll admit that, but they're at least better than When They Cry. Like, how would you title the second season after that? When They Cry 2? Anyways, so with all that in mind, I have meticulously calculated values for the categories of story, characters, animation, sound, and my own personal enjoyment, which after cutting off its fingernails, impaling it with a variety of instruments, dropping it off a 5-story building, and then cutting it open, spreading its guts everywhere, before finally throwing it into a ditch, covering it in petrol, and then lighting it on fire, has me awarding Higurashi no Naku Koro ni with an overall score of 8.14 out of 10, and an overall rating of certified frosty, a rating only for the best of the best, and shows too important to ignore. It has its flaws, yes, but as a piece of fiction, especially in the horror mystery genres, there are few that match it. At the time of this video, Higurashi is unlicensed. The first half was formerly licensed by Geneon and then briefly distributed by Funimation before the license expired, and then no one bothered to pick it back up again. The second season, Higurashi Kai, has never been licensed, which is a rather large shame. Also, the show has never been made available for streaming legally, so the only way to watch it with English subtitles is to rely on fan subs, which is something I don't normally like to do, but if we're lucky, some nice, enterprising company will decide to fully license both seasons of the show, and maybe even give it a, I don't know, a better dub. But now I have no idea what company would be up for a challenge like that, but you know, if they were, I would be truly grateful to them. For alternate anime recommendations, I point you towards that famously short and wonderfully graphic series that is Elfen Lied, following it up with the even more graphic Rin Daughters of Mnemosyne, because good horror is hard to come by these days. One might also recommend the show's spiritual successor, Yumeneko no Naku Koro ni, although there are those who would tell you it's utter shit. And that's it for me. Please subscribe if you enjoyed the video, follow me on Twitter if you feel so inclined. And until next time, ladies, gentlemen, and others, stay frosty. Oh, God damn.